So one of the differences that you need to understand when editing in Avid is the way that tracks are patched and the way patching works and the various timeline options that are down here. So let's explore some of that before we can do too much more editing. Basically, there are two sides, just like they are in Final Cut Pro. There's the sequence side, which is this entire group here. This shows you the patching for the timeline itself. And this group here shows you the patching for the source side, or what's in the source monitor. If I clear, for example, the monitor, you'll see that now there's nothing patched on this side. The only thing we have is the sequence itself. If we add another clip, for example, maybe a clip without any audio, now you can see that on the source side, there's only a video track to this clip. There's no associated audio with this clip. It's only video. So one of the big differences between Final Cut Pro and Avid is the number of states or modes that your timeline can be in. Avid doesn't have a lot, so it's much cleaner and simpler, at least for me, to understand how things are patched. For example, let's call up again a clip with some audio to it. To make sure that one track goes to another track, you can drag it. For example, if I want A2 to go to A1, I would simply do that. If I don't want A1 to go to A2 at all, I just have nothing down here at all. If I want to have filler go to A2 while I do this edit, then I could turn on A2 and not A1, and that means when I do this edit, nothing would go into A2. There would be just filler added to that point. If I turn off track 2 completely, then what's going to happen is possibly I'll lose sync because I'm not going to put anything on A2. If I were to do an edit right here and say edit this footage into my sequence, you can see that it only added audio and video on tracks V1 and A1. A2 it didn't do anything to, so now all of my audio is out of sync from there on. Let's undo that edit. There's two ways to fix that. Let's say A1 is bad, it's a camera mic and the audio is terrible from it, but we still want to maintain sync. To maintain sync, we can turn on A2, turn off this bad camera mic, which is going in here, and then do our edit again. Let's try that. And you can see that it's overwritten. I used the overwrite button, but we could easily use the splice button. It's left filler in this A2 space, but we have sync all the way down our timeline. The other way to do this is turn off A2, but we're going to turn on the sync locks. Sync locks is these group of dashes right here. And by turning on these group of dashes, we're telling the Avid, always maintain sync downstream. We don't want to mess up sync, even if we accidentally have, bad track selection like we did before. Now if I do that same edit that I did before that screwed up sync, it automatically loads filler to be able to maintain sync. So if you want to always edit with sync locks on, you can do that. That's a pretty safe thing to do. If you're trying to change sync for some reason, then obviously you'll have to turn it off. The way to turn sync locks on is individually. You can turn them on like this. Or if you want to turn them on in a group, you click on the time code sync lock and all of them turn on or off. And you can turn them on in groups if you want. If all you want to do is maintain the sync in audio channels 1 and 2, but not in V1, then you can do that and you'll maintain sync in just audio tracks 1 and 2. The other things that we need to know about the timeline are just like in Final Cut Pro. If you want to see your audio waveforms, click on this icon here and you'll have audio waveforms. If you want to enlarge the tracks, instead of having a little button down here which has different sizes of tracks, Avid relies on a modifier key command, which is Command L for large or enlarge, and this makes your tracks bigger, or Command K for shrink, and that makes your track smaller. The other cool thing is if you want to make just the waveforms inside the track bigger or smaller, hold down Command and Option and K, and I've shrunk the waveform inside the track, and enlarging the waveform is Command Option L. The other thing that you can do, similar to Final Cut Pro, is you can click on this little button that kind of looks like keyframing or rubber banding and turn on auto gain. When you turn on auto gain, the waveforms get kind of grayed out and you get this other little line which is your audio level line. What you're able to do then is hit the apostrophe key or the quotes key right next to the return key to add a keyframe. Move down a little bit, add another keyframe, add another keyframe, add another keyframe. And then to be able to move these keyframes, it's not quite like Final Cut where right now I'm trying to click on it and move it. It won't move. That's because I need to turn on this little button over here, the keyframe button. And now when I click, I'm able to lift keyframes up and down however I want. Can add another keyframe with that apostrophe, pull that down. If I want to be able to change a group of keyframes, I can mark them from in to out, and now I can move the entire group of keyframes up and down inside of that marked in to out clip. And if I want to move them side to side, I need to hold down the Option key, and now I can move the individual keyframes left and right. So that's how you do keyframing. You can also solo or mute a specific track. If you solo a track, it automatically mutes the other track. Obviously, that's what soloing is, so it's just kind of showing you if you want to solo this one, then this one will be muted. You can also mute tracks individually. And you can also turn on and off the video monitoring. If you've got another video track, let's say I'm going to hit Command Y, that adds extra video tracks. To look at them, you just click in this little box here. This is the monitoring box. So you can monitor V1, monitor V2, V3, or V4. You can also click on the button again and not monitor anything at all. So now you see nothing at all. And this is great if you've got a really complex video sequence, a really complex audio sequence. Turn off video monitoring while you're doing audio edits, for example, and you'll have much better performance. So you can turn that off. The great thing about Avid when you're comparing it to Final Cut Pro that you'll just love is if you're on, say, monitoring V4 and you want to switch to monitoring V1, all of your renders, everything stays. In Final Cut Pro, when you change your monitoring, as you probably know, all of your renders, it gives you a warning and says if you change the monitoring, you're going to lose all your renders. In Avid, that doesn't happen. Your renders are always saved even when you change monitors like this. So those are some of the biggest items in the timeline. I want to show you a couple other timeline options. Those timeline options are down here in this little timeline fast menu. So just click on that. And I want to show you a couple of them. For example, you can see that I have thumbnails in my timeline. If you don't want any thumbnails, you can change that to not have any thumbnails, which some people prefer not to have those at all. You can turn off effect icons, which might help your performance in the timeline a little bit. I leave them on. Dissolve icons, let's say, for example, I put a dissolve in here. You hit the backslash key above the return key, and this gets you a dissolve. You can choose how long the dissolve is, how far before the transition that it starts, and whether you want to apply to all transitions between a mark in and an out. Hit render, and you can see that there's a little icon that shows that there's a dissolve here. If you don't want to see those icons, you can actually turn them off by turning off dissolve icons or effect icons. I like to have them on, but you can turn them on and off if you want to. Some of the other choices are clip frames. That is the thumbnails. Basically, Avid's word for a thumbnail is clip frames, and you see when I turn that off, the thumbnails in the timeline go away. Other choices are clip text. For example, right now you're seeing the name of the clip. If you don't want the name of the clip and you want a nice clean timeline, you can choose none. And that way there's no information in the timeline at all. There's a bunch of other clip text choices. You can choose the duration or comments. For example, if you want to make comments and be able to see the comments in there, you can do that. Sync breaks, if you want to be able to see when you're out of sync, you can do that. I've got sync breaks on both my audio and video tracks so that when you saw that I accidentally broke sync, the little white numbers showed up showing how far out of sync I was. Dupe detection, if you use the same shot twice in a sequence and you have dupe detection turned on, then it puts a little colored line in the timeline saying, hey, you used this shot already. Color correction shows whether you've added color correction to a specific shot. Audio data, you can turn on whether you're seeing waveforms and what the clip gain or whether you've got rubber banding. Rubber banding in Avid is called auto gain, so that can be turned on or off. Clip color is really interesting. You can decide whether you want to have the local color in the timeline for a specific clip or the source color. Now, let me just show you this because this is pretty cool. If we take one of our clips And we change the color of that clip by going up here and choosing set color and making it purple. Now you can see up here, this clip is purple. Now down here, if we turn on clip color and choose source, then the clips from this source are now purple in the timeline. So if you're trying to track, for example, a voiceover or some music or something that you want to be able to see where those clips are in the timeline or where specific groups of clips are, you can color the clips in the bin and then see where those same clips are in the timeline. The other way to do this is back down to the fast menu, clip color, turn off source and turn on timeline local. And what timeline local allows you to do is to pick a clip, select the segment, right click on it and choose set local clip color, and you can turn just one single clip to a color. Maybe you're working on a long show and you want to see where the bumpers are in your show. You can color the bumpers a specific color so they're easy to find when you're going through the segment. I've chosen to make these two clips be a different color so they're easy to find in my timeline. Track color, you can also have your entire tracks be different color. So now all these tracks that I had selected are purple in color except for the ones that I colored locally. All these are now purple. This A2 was not selected, so A2 is not purple. You can also change the name. If you want to rename a track and instead of having it called A1, you want to have it called Dialogue maybe, you can have that specific track called Dialogue, which is very useful in a big long edit. Show locators, that's pretty obvious. Just anytime you add a locator to your timeline, it's going to show you those locators in your timeline. Show tracks, you can actually hide specific tracks if you don't want to look at them, you don't want to see them. You can hide these from view and only look at certain tracks. It's a little risky. You can still edit on tracks that you can't see. So I would say make sure that you've got all these on. Track control panel is this information off to the side over here. More detail and less detail. This is zooming. So if you want to zoom in the timeline, a little bit different than Final Cut Pro, you can hold down the Command key, and instead of using the plus and minus keys, you use the two keys right under them, the bracket keys. So left bracket makes the timeline smaller, and right bracket zooms in all the way. And if you want to get back to being able to see the entire timeline, you do Command question mark, and that gets you the entire timeline. Show entire sequence. There it is. You can see right there the keystroke command. And another one is the zoom in. And what you can do with this is hold down the Command and M button, and then you can zoom into a specific portion of your timeline by simply lassoing it. So if I only want to zoom into the green clip, I just click, lasso left to right, and let go, and that specific portion of the screen is what's zoomed into. Let's try that again, Command M, and if I just want to zoom into this dissolve, boom, the dissolve is the entire timeline. If I want to get back out, Command question mark. And that's a look at your timeline options.